Welcome back, adventurers. If you've mastered the art of Act 1 and are ready to elevate your campaign and learn how to plot Act 2, we're going to be building on the foundation laid out in Act 1. So if you haven't seen that video, click right here, watch that one first. Now, this guide is specifically tailored for those people who thrive in a story-driven environment. If you're a DM and you want to learn how to tell a specific story, this is what we're talking about today. If you would rather wing it and have your players kind of create that story with you, then do that. But this is if you have something in mind and you have a specific arc that you want to go through, this is how I plot mine. And if that helps you, then great. So in Act 1, really what we did was set the groundwork for the world. And, after that, we tested the characters, we dropped a bombshell in the end, we set the stakes. The whole point of Act 2 is to escalate the stakes, right? I heard it once said that Act 1 is putting your characters in a tree, Act 2 is setting that tree on fire. On that same note, Act 3 would be getting them out of that tree. Now, Act 2 is not about just introducing the world and the immediate threats anymore. That's small world stuff, right? By the beginning of Act 2, the world is bigger, the story is bigger, the stakes are bigger. So our goal for this breakdown is to learn how to deepen the conflict, introduce complex subplots, and challenge your players with, moral dilemmas and intricate puzzles that are going to test not just their skills, but their characters' beliefs and their motivations. Once you can do that, the story becomes personal to them, and it gives them something to fight for and a reason to care about the world that you've created. So now that's all great and dandy, but how do you actually go about doing that? Well, the beginning of Act 2 is about exploration and expansion. Your players are now familiar with your immediate setting, the one that you have set up, and what they want to know is what lies beyond. So your goal as a DM is to expand their world, introduce these new locations that are not just geographically diverse, but also very culturally rich, right? Each new area should offer unique challenges, it should offer opportunities for your characters to grow, and it should show the history of your world little piece by little piece. In the island example from part 1, the journey so far, they have seen an inciting incident that called them to adventure, and they had to go to this island with the mysterious light. They were tested on that road as a newfound party, and they have a good understanding of what the initial threat is now. They've seen the artifact. At least they understand who or what aims to stand in their way, right? In my example, the threat is that newly discovered sorcerer and their cult, and also the Thieves Guild that might want the artifact for themselves, or the local lords if they want it for themselves as well. You also need to think that there's also mystery involved because they don't know what the cult actually wants, right? They just know that the cult wants this thing that they found on the island. Now, the goal when breaking up Act 2 is to get your players to what is called the Innermost Cave in the hero's journey, and eventually at the end of that journey, get them to the midpoint of the whole story, right? In Star Wars: A New Hope, Luke enters this moment when he decides to trust the Force and not the computer. He takes that leap of faith. But he doesn't just go there, he has to be led there. He has to lose Ben Kenobi first, right? Spoilers. So step 1 is setting up more tests, more enemies, more allies. That is literally the first part of the second act of the hero's journey. It is tests, enemies, and allies. So at this point, if this was my game, if I was actually running this game, I would be laying more breadcrumbs through a new sort of main quest, quote, end quote. In our island example, the party has the artifact, this hologram that went off when they touched the artifact, projected maybe a mysterious map, and this might compel them to go visit a neighboring city or a country or some expert for information. Now, the best case scenario for this example is the party actually feels compelled to look for more information because they're all directly involved, right? They're wanted by the Lord or the cult or the Thieves Guild, or they're connected to the storyline because the artifact is somehow connected to their backstory. And now they need to stick together for safety because the world that they know is at stake, whether that means it's just the local town or if it's literally a world-ending event. That would be best case scenario. So they take their first steps as a real party or a real unit, right? And along this new road, as they're discovering what comes after the first act, there's going to be new NPCs that they meet. And remember that the whole point of Act 2 is that they need to feel tested. They need to feel like they're involved in something that's bigger than themselves now. They might meet a new enemy in this process, a knight who is honor-bound to retrieve the artifact at any cost and bring it back to the local king or queen or whatever. They might meet a master assassin that's working for the guild that also wants it because they were sent there. Or the sorcerer turns out to be just a henchman of some grander master of the cult, and they're in the process of finding that out. They might also meet some amazing NPCs to lighten that load, to lighten the story and the road that they're taking, right? They might come across a shopkeeper that was once an adventurer. They might meet a cleric that has some answers to all their questions and offers to help them, and, in many ways becomes their savior or their mentor. In the island scenario that I created, I would test the party, have them meet some awesome NPCs that can point them in the right direction towards a master. Let's call him the Weaver. This cleric cleric happens to know the master and has answers that they're seeking, so this cleric points them to a far-off city, and now you have a new quest, a new goal, get to that city. Right, and all of this is still the beginning of Act 2, right? This is still within the bullet point on the chart that would be tests, enemies, and allies. They are on the way to travel to meet this weaver, whoever they are, at a library far away in some distant country, and when they arrive after encountering, X amount of things that you want to put in along that road. It could be a day away. It could be 4 hours away. It could be weeks away. However long you want to make the campaign, however long you want to stretch that journey, that's up to you. But the point is, everything that happens along the way is them meeting more allies, meeting more enemies, or facing more tests, and just raising the stakes a little bit, right? So when they finally do get to this Weaver person, he tells the party that the artifact is part of an ancient and forgotten war, and that the map in the hologram is actually pointing them to an arcane seal that was used to hold a great evil at bay, an elder god that has been sealed away. Now, the Weaver might inform them that this cult is known to them, that they know what the cult is looking for, that the cult is seeking to restore an elder god to power. Now the world is growing, the stakes are higher, and they know why the cult needs the artifact, right? Another mystery checked off. Then the Weaver informs the party that the item will be safe with his order, and they can leave it with him. Now, at this point, the party might feel a weight lifted, and obviously that's not the end of the story. This is just the beginning of Act 2. This would be a good moment for them to have some downtime, because remember, we want the party to have those ups and downs of that roller coaster as part of the story. If they're always stressed, it becomes a task, not a game. If they're always stress-free, then it teeters on being low stakes and easy, and if that's what you want, then that's great, but if you want to challenge your players, definitely want to get that up and down to get the emotional roller coaster going. Now, it's your job to decide what the right balance is. How much stress and how much freedom, how much fun do you want? It's up to you to determine what level of story and how high the stakes are for this. And you should set that up with your party and figure that out on your side, because maybe your players don't want something that's going to stress them out or be super involved like that. And that's something that you need to talk with them about. Now, whatever the case, the party did their job. They found the artifact, they brought it back, and they've left it with this Weaver. So in their eyes, they're done. So maybe they spend some time shopping. They go to the local springs, or they go drinking, or whatever. But once that's wrapped up, suddenly they see smoke rising from that same library. It's under attack. Now they have to decide if they want to let it happen or if they want to get involved. Now, if they rescue the artifact, that means that they probably feel like they have to take it themselves, because newsflash, it wasn't actually as safe as they thought. This is where you insert the boss fight encounter at the Great Library, and this could be an amazing level. You could really go into the map design, into the encounter, make this challenging, make this the first real encounter that they have to face with a greater power. Now, once that encounter's all done, once it's all said and done, they're probably going to feel like the artifact is safer with them, or the Weaver gives it to them with his dying breath, and trusting it to them, right? And with his dying breath, he tells them that there's a book that has an ancient ritual in it that can not only destroy the artifact, but also seal the elder evil away forever. This book, however, happens to be sealed away in a tomb with the author. He gives them a location, and then he dies. Now remember, in Lord of the Rings, Frodo could have left the ring in Rivendell and let them figure it out, but he knew it was his destiny, for better or worse. Frodo approached the Innermost Cave at the Council of Elrond, and he came out of it braver and stronger, because he chose to take on the burden of the ring. He chose to put aside his own fear, his own emotions, and take on that role as ring bearer. Now, your characters are like Frodo. They are going to have that same oh shit moment at the end of this step. They need to actively make the choice to finish this. The characters have to choose to see this through, or they need to be forced into it. Now, when they do that, they have taken that leap of faith. They know now that it is their duty, it's their destiny. They have to see this through to the end. The party has gone into the Innermost Cave. They have looked in themselves, and they found a deeper calling. They are heroes. They are adventurers, right? This is going to make them feel like the main characters. Now remember, all of that we just talked about was only step 1 of Act 2. So you can see how this one singular step might be broken down into multiple steps depending on encounters or whatever. We're going to plot out here on our graph tests, allies, and enemies. It's sort of a mini trail of trials, and along the way, there's even a boss fight if you want to make that library an epic moment. So we have test 1, which can be an encounter with the Thieves Guild or whoever. Meeting an ally is the cleric. Test 2 can be the lords or a cultist attack. And at the end of that, the enemies attack at the library, and then they reach the next step, which is the Innermost Cave, the moment they decide to take the artifact artifact and see it through to the end. So the next step then, step 2 of this video, is the road to the midpoint, which is also a sort of false hope moment. At this point, you want to think about how your story is going to shift after this step. Will an ally of theirs become their enemy? Will the world suddenly fall into a world-shattering event? In this island scenario, I might be hiding the fact that that awesome cleric they met that sent them to the Weaver is actually secretly in league with the cult. And I'm actually going to roll with that, so let's keep that in mind. Now, for step 2, you have another series of tasks and trials. The tomb they seek is in another land, in some ancient ruins, so now they have to travel there, and this is a dangerous road. The characters that they meet along that road and the encounters they have are going to mimic the darkening story. This is going to be another series of tasks or trials. Now, trial 1 in this case is the Thieves Guild attacks again, except this time it's in full force, right? You want to keep those threats alive and remind your players that those threats are still a constant thing because they have made enemies. Then trial 2, they encounter a strange beast they have never seen before, and this would be a really great place for like a dragon or some sort of other powerful being, maybe a hag. But the idea is to not always encounter something that's intelligent, encounter things that are part of the environment they're in, something that would be in this forest or this valley or wherever it is that they're traveling through. And then trial 3 would be the sorcerer finds them. The one that they met on the island in Act 1 finds them. They face off with him at last, right at the entrance to the tomb, because remember, even though we have some encounters, it should always be a step closer to that overarching story. So now we move to step 3 of plotting Act 2, which is the ordeal. So once they defeat the sorcerer, the cleric shows up. He pretends to have been a captive of the sorcerer. The party, already having built trust with him, obviously helps the cleric out. They unlock the tomb, and then the cleric turns on them. He tells them that he needed them to open the tomb for him, and when he does, that great evil inside awakens. They haven't fully set it free, because that would be crazy and would ruin pretty much the rest of the story if it really just came down to the villain winning that quickly. But now, that villain is one step closer to the world-ending event, and it's all the party's fault. Now the world plunges into an eternal night or something, and the cleric might even try to take the artifact from them, fight them for it. And even if they are able to restrain the cleric or even kill him in the end, the cleric can leave with some badass line like, "There's no stopping it now," or "You did everything according to plan, and now they should be really scared." This is the midpoint on the chart. This is what we wanted to reach. The midpoint on the chart can be anything, but it should be a complete 180 of the adventure so far and really set the tone for the last half of the story. So for example, if you want a horror game, this is the moment things get really scary. Step 4 is a sort of recovery phase. They still have their mission. So in this example, the midpoint is not only the fact that they accidentally let loose the main bad guy, who has now gotten one step closer to being unleashed. Think of it like Voldemort in The Goblet of Fire. They're around, but he's in a tiny, creepy little fetus body, so he's not really that much of a threat, but the fact that he's even around is just one step closer to the oh crap, Now step 4 is a sort of recovery phase. They still have their mission. They've defeated the cleric, they go into the ruins, they solve some puzzles, they find the tomb that they were looking for that the Weaver sent them to, and they recover the book. Mission accomplished. They did the thing they set out to do. Now this part should feel less like a challenge, right? You want to give them a bit of a win here because they just got their asses kicked. So they get the book, they make their way out and decide it's time to go back to where it all started to regroup their home, whether that's a city or a town or wherever the adventure started. They might even decide to seek help from the king or queen or the council or whoever, because they're in over their heads at this point and they should be assembling their allies. So of course, because of the cleric, they might have trust issues, and I mean severe trust issues, and that's all part of the game, right? You want them to be second guessing everything because they don't know who to trust, and they really shouldn't be trusting everybody, especially with something as important as this artifact. Now the road back can be filled with some encounters. This could be more of a side quest and less about challenging the players. They are in their darkest moments here. This is the first real loss, and every win is going to help in building back their confidence, and you want them to build back their confidence. And this is a good segue for us because going into that last step, step 5 of Act 2, is the reward. This is where the narrative reaches a sort of boiling point. Perhaps a great god or a goddess shows up in their time of need because this being has been watching them and it's seen their willingness to fight the darkness, and one of the players might have a dream about their deity because remember, we should be tying in their backstories. So on the chart, the next bullet point that we put down is the reward, where one of the characters has a dream where their deity speaks to them about the greater good and the need to keep going, blah blah blah. The idea is to pair this world-shattering moment for them with a sense of hope. Otherwise, what's the point? For Frodo, this moment is the Bridge of Khazad-dûm. The midpoint of the film is when Gandalf falls to the Balrog. But when they meet the elves of Lothlorien that give them rest, guidance, and even supplies, that's that moment of hope. They may feel lost, but they have a sense of what the next steps are. The mission is in jeopardy, but it's not over. Now things might change from here because now we're entering the beginning of the road back. And the main point here is that although they may be going back home, they are not the same heroes they were when they left. Act 2 ends with a sense of dread, but also a feeling of we have to finish this. In Lord of the Rings, spoilers ahead by the way, the story ends with the death of Boromir. But Frodo has Sam. There's a sense of sadness because of the way the movie ends, but we also know as viewers that as long as Frodo has Sam, there's hope for the quest. Now things are at their darkest now for your party. Act 2 is setting up the final boss, setting up that fight, and every moment should now reflect that. It might end in their hometown, a new city, or whatever, but they should have a plan, or at least beginning to make a plan. They should have some hope. They have tools. They have to regroup and rethink, and the deity could totally offer them, by the way, this is how you defeat him, and just give them the things that they need to do. Or, for example, in Critical Role, they had to go and find the vestiges, right? That's what gave them the power, at least gave them enough power to have the hope of ever defeating Vecna, even if it wasn't a big chance. Now, the coolest part of this moment, this dark moment for them before they go to officially challenge the next thing or whatever, is that they have time to level up so that the next time they face the cult or the cleric or whoever, they'll be ready, and it'll make that ending all the more satisfying because this time they're going to be able to pack more punch and be more effective in the fight, and it'll feel like they've grown, which will help in making the characters feel like they've grown. Now, obviously this is a big picture, and if you want to have a full campaign, you would be throwing in side quests and little threads here and there for them to pull on, because these are the steps for Act 2, but it might take 6 months to go through because they're also going to go visit that vampire's lair, and they heard about a treasure over in that goblin's den. They might take X step and go to place A, B, and C, but whatever the case, you still know that the midpoint of the story is the midpoint of the story, and however many steps it takes for them to get to that point, you have a direction. Again, having that direction is what helps kind of guide the overarching narrative, and it's up to you to decide how many encounters and how many sessions you want to have between all of that. So just go into it knowing that obviously this is a condensed version of what your entire Act 2 would look like, and there could very well be multiple stories and multiple bosses, but at the end you should be thinking about that big boss and that big midpoint and how you're going to get your players from that first step and all the way through to the end of Act 2. So anyways, that's how I plot Act 2. So to summarize sort of everything, you have step 1 with new tests, new enemies, more allies to really build up the world. Then you have a defining moment where the stakes suddenly raise. For us, it was the death of the Weaver and the attack on the library. And the party then enters the Innermost Cave because things just got really bad, and now they feel like they have to be the ones to see this through because this is their destiny. This is where the party feels like the main characters. Then you have step 2, which is the false hope. You have another series of trials that send them on what they think is going to solve the big problem, another quest. For us, this was them going to the tomb of the author of the book that has the ritual that can end the cult's plans. All of this leads up to the midpoint. Now, the midpoint here was when the cleric decided to turn on them, and they also accidentally plunged the world into eternal night. This is where things get flipped on them, and maybe the whole world gets flipped, you know? Things are really bad, but they finish the mission, and afterwards in step 4, they have a moment of quiet, a breath before that plunge. Now, this is the dip downwards in the story. Tension drops even though the stakes are at their highest. They see the mission through, they make their way to the next destination, whether that's home or some other place, but it feels like it was for nothing because the midpoint still happened. So this is where you step up and you build back their confidence. They get a little bit stronger. That's the whole point of step 4, is sort of building them back up, making them feel more prepared, maybe even level them up. And then they get to the final step. Once they have sort of been challenged a little more, they've been tested a little bit more, they get their reward or the boon. They have a weapon or a power or a gift or a new ally, or, you know, the deity in our example comes down and talks to them and gives them the next steps. That way, even though things are dark, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. All they have to do is walk towards that exit. They have hope. Now they are looking ahead at Act 3 with a feeling of, well, here we go, and maybe at the end of it all, they'll come out on top. Now, like I said, naturally you can add random encounters between each step, really stretch out the act, make it as long or as short as you need to. I hope this video helped. Let me know how you plot out Act 2 in the comments below. You guys seem to really react well to my use of the hero's journey in this, so I hope this helps you guys. Let me know what you think. Now, some quick shoutouts for those of you who are keeping an eye out for Tobias in our last videos. Christopher Otero says, is Tobias a merchant or a pirate in secret? Yo, be cool, man. The Resinosaurus Kalaniformis says, this is great. I love the quick information-packed format. Thank you so much. I try to do my best. I have the attention span of a sparrow, so I get it. Dylan Rondeau says, Tobias is off to find new lands. Tobias is always off to find new lands, and I really hope I said that name correctly. Probably not. If you're new to this, keep your eyes out in our videos for Tobias, and you just might be lucky enough to get shouted out in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. As always, forge on, my friends, and we'll see you next time, adventurers.